Right, I'm going to hand over to Liz now, who's going to basically do the rest of the session, and then I'll sort of conduct the questions or pick the questions at the end. Cool.
Okay, I very much realise I'm standing between everyone and dinner and getting ready, so I will try and keep it very short, snappy, and a little bit interactive as well at times. And I've already been told off for not using an official NUS slide, so I apologise for that on branding straight away. Okay, so my name's Liz, I'm on the National Executive Committee, but last year I was an officer at Liverpool Guild of Students where I was Deputy President. We faced a course closure campaign, well not a course closure campaign, threats of course closures in our Politics and Communications Department, our Philosophy Department and our Statistics Department. And it started from students and it was quite a fast-paced campaign really. So here I've got for you exactly what the NUS are planning to do in context of course closure across the UK. But firstly, you know, my example of how I experienced a course closure campaign in my institution last year. So next slide, please. Okay, so why is NUS preparing this resource? As Aaron has already kind of outlined, this is an issue that's facing institutions across the UK. What I'd like to say first of all is to make clear that we're not saying that if your institution faces a course closure, immediately you should launch a massive student campaign. If that's what your students want to do, fine, do that. But sometimes you've got to assess whether a course being closed or a discipline being removed is the right thing for your institution. When we're looking at it, we have to look at it regionally, whether it's going to benefit everyone in the region, whether it's going to leave gaps in a curriculum, or perhaps whether actually the students aren't getting the experience they deserve there, and whether actually if it was another institution locally it might be better. So the main thing I want to sort of point out actually is that we're not here to say that immediately there should be some kind of campaign to stop course closures, but it should really be in the context of what's best for your students, what's best for your student experience, and also how is that course closure or subject discipline being removed from the curriculum going to affect them in the long term. And as a union, that's kind of your main priority, is to make sure that that does not affect the students who are on those courses. Okay, so yeah, again, the main reason we're looking at this is the increasing number of courses that are facing the acts across the UK, and I've got a few unions here who later will sort of talk about their experience of course closures currently. Many of these maybe have been for financial reasons, although we're actually finding that it tends to be student support where cuts are made because of financial reasons. So things like cleaners being removed from accommodation, porters being removed, that kind of side of things. In some course closures, for example, for us it was in terms of research performance reasons. So next slide, please. Okay, so our campaign was called Save Our Subjects. I believe Ed Maloney was the current Deputy President of Liverpool Guild of Students, was the guy to come up with Save Our Subjects. I don't know if any of you were members of a group called Save Our Sabs last year for all you second years. It was kind of stolen off that, and it came about in the first meeting we had with the students who were interested in getting a campaign started. Next slide, please. Okay, so how did this all come about? This is a very sort of very brief outline of what the research assessment exercise outlines as world-leading, international leading research. But firstly, there were some Senate papers released by the senior management team of the university, which outlined a bottom quartile of the departments who had performed in the research quite badly. So these included departments of cancer studies, dentistry, civic design, and a number of other courses as well. But the main priority, the bottom three, were philosophy, politics and communications, and statistics. And these are the ones which they said that they would like to review and bring forward to the next meeting, proposals for closure. Now, this was a problem with the Senate papers. There was very little communication before the Senate papers came out. There was no direct communication with staff, there was no direct communication with students. In the papers, it literally said, the next meeting, we'll be bringing proposals for closure. So reading those papers, you kind of get the impression that there was that it had already been a done decision. Actually, what the university were trying to say was there's going to be a period of consultation where we're going to look at how the departments are performing and then make a judged assessment on that. But the main point of the campaign was to kind of get that inevitability removed from the Senate papers and what would be decided at the Senate meeting. So the papers were released only 5 days actually before the Senate meeting took place, and it was found out in quite an interesting way. Next slide, please. Okay, so the head of department of politics was walking along, and he was approached by another head of department who turned around to him and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry about the news." And he was like, "Excuse me, what?" And so he looked into it further, and the Senate papers obviously outlined that the politics department was one of those marked for possible closure. So obviously the communication with the department wasn't brilliant straight from the start. Next slide, please. This is the head of department. His name's John Tong. He's a bit of a legend in the university, and you'll see why in a video later on. Next slide, please. Okay, so how did students get mobilised? Well, the head of department spoke to the students about what was going on. Course reps, actually. So this was a course rep-led campaign, which is always very exciting. And they met in the library on the Saturday. So the papers were released on a Friday. On the Saturday, all the students met up in the library. All the course reps, so postgraduates, undergraduates, and just interested parties. So the student media came along as well. And that's where the campaign really kicked off. Ed gave it its name, Save Our Subjects, and then it moved on. A petition was created immediately, Facebook group. They decided they wanted to make their voice heard. They realised they had very little time because the Senate meeting was actually on Wednesday where the decision was getting made. So they decided, actually, let's get a protest going on outside so they can show the student feeling, because they just didn't feel there was any way. I wouldn't say necessarily a protest for every single campaign is the way to go. The way this campaign worked was in a very multi-dimensional way. There wasn't just one route that it worked well. It was literally spread across a number of different factors that it worked in the way it did. But yeah, they decided to express their feelings. They were going to have a protest. We had a briefing meeting for all students on the Monday, where all students who were concerned, because there'd been no direct communication either with students about proposals that were going to Senate. Only obviously they would probably expect us to communicate, and we did. We liaised with students, and so we held this briefing meeting on the Monday, and we outlined to students what was possibly going to happen and what the papers actually said and what they could do to get involved with it. So we had over 100 attend the first meeting, and obviously rumours aren't particularly helpful when it comes to these campaigns. A lot of students were very concerned about what was going to happen to their quality of education. So that immediately was something we wanted to make sure the students had a clear idea of what was going on, and that was a guild role really, was to ensure that everyone was very aware of what was happening. And so obviously also students were collaborating with UCU as well, which was very positive about the campaign. It definitely sort of increased the working relationship with UCU. And there were departmental stunts that went on. So, for example, the philosophy department decided to have a poster, a banner outside its department saying "Save Our Subjects." And there was also a meeting with the VC in the Civic Design building where he had an open window, and all the students decided just to stand outside the window with "Save Our Subjects" outside. And it was an idea that was constant pressure from all angles happening. Next slide, please. So this was the philosophy building being covered in the SOS poster. Next slide, please. This is a petition they started to get going. Next slide. When you get this resource, you'll be able to see this, but it's a bit of an ABBA SOS video which shows them petitioning as well in the guild, but I won't give you the pleasure of seeing that now due to technical difficulties. Next slide, please. Okay, so the big bit about the campaign was also the media impact it had. It was immense. The student media obviously on the Saturday kicked off with publishing an article on it, and then by Sunday we had the Times Higher writing about it. Monday the Times went into further detail as they got access to the papers that the closures were about, and then the local newspapers, Echo and Daily Post, and then constantly Danny as president was getting calls to speak on interviews about it. We had the BBC did a news article as well on their BBC Northwest programme as well about philosophers and the impact of philosophy in the community. So it really was a massive kind of media campaign. Next slide, please. It even got on the big screen in Liverpool. There was an advert for Virgin Trains at the time. I don't think you can comprehend how big this is. It's the biggest screen in Europe. And one of the students texted in "Save Our Subjects," and they didn't have a clue what it's about, so at the end they wrote okay. But you know, it got the message out across the city. Next slide, please. So leading to the Wednesday. On the Tuesday again, we had even increased coverage. Like I said, BBC News were covering it. We have the Daily Telegraph write about it, and yeah, it just increased from there. And random blog sites, people talking about, debating actually, the balance between what is important when it comes to a department for a student. Is it the importance of research in that department, or is it actually the quality of teaching? Why should we have these departments existing in our new universities? And I think that was quite an interesting debate that had managed to be kicked off sort of nationally and locally. One of the headlines of the Daily Post, which is a local newspaper, was obviously, if any of you know Liverpool or local to Liverpool, you know it's a very political city, and the idea of having a politics department removed from the city was obviously quite emotional for people in the city, and it rose a lot of debate.